So this is Destroy Artifact, Episode 3. We're going to call this one Scheduling the Muse. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, this is just about creativity, the pitfalls and the joys of it, mostly as it relates to us as we write supplements for tabletop RPGs. I'm here. I'm Tim. I'm obviously, as always, joined with my brother James here. But we have a very special guest, Mr. Matt Click from A Fistful of Dice. What's going on, Matt?
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me on.
For sure. This is something that, it's funny, you're kind of intrinsically tied to because Matt is one of the members of the company we're talking about. We write supplements for the independent publisher Absolute Tabletop. And Matt...
The independent publisher that we are founders of.
Right.
To be clearer.
To be clearer.
We write for these guys.
These big wigs.
And so Matt works with us. He is essentially our editor-in-chief, really, making sure that everything is up to snuff when we put it out. And so, we were just kind of talking, and I was like, hey, man, you wanna hop on the show? And he's like, yeah, I'd love to. So today's topic, Scheduling the Muse, is really just about the number one problem that I hear people tell me. In every form, I'll hear it in voice messages, I'll see this in videos or comments, messages privately to me. Hey, I've got 1,000 ideas. I don't have time to write them all. What do you do? And so I kind of want to just throw it to you guys. What do you do?
So I have 1,000 ideas. I have no idea. I can't write them all, Tim. What do I do? No, I think this is kind of the what I'll call the BS answer. Hopefully one or both of you have a better answer than this. You gotta pick one and start writing. It doesn't matter if you never use it or if you don't plan on using it or if by the time you start getting it out you hate it. Just hit the keys or write the words or whatever. You absolutely just have to do it. You gotta do it. Just pick one. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, I agree. Matt, What do you do?
I mean, I struggle with this so much. I'm struggling with it right now. But I think most of it, actually, is the fear of writing something bad or creating something bad.
Yeah.
And something that I learned in college when I was doing English writing, which is a major in college that basically means that you're going to be writing about 12 pages a day no matter what.
Holy cow.
You get over that real quick. You come to this point where you have to embrace the shitty first draft, which that's literally what my professors would call it. The shitty first draft is like, it's really rare that you're going to write something and the first incarnation of it, you sit down, you write it, you go, I love it. It's perfect. There's nothing I would change about this.
What is that phrase? Set, print, send.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't remember.
I love it. It's perfect. Beautiful.
No, it's like print that. It's like frame it, print it, and I don't know. This is falling apart. You guys got nothing for me? What's it called?
Frame it,
print.
I think it's like it has to do with a printing press. Like, so there are three things, like do this, and do this. Like the last one is like print it.
Set, type, print.
Or maybe it's in film, like cut, edit. I don't know.
Yeah, the way I see it is like the most of the stuff that you write is gonna be bad. Like,
yeah, totally.
Like a good majority of it is just not gonna be usable. But that doesn't mean that it's a waste of time. I think people are afraid of, like, I don't want to sit down and spend an hour writing something that I'm never going to use. It's like,
exactly.
That's writing, man. That's what it is. And that is writing stuff that you're never going to use.
That's practicing. It doesn't matter if you don't use it. In the same way that if I practice guitar and I'm like, I want to kind of come up with something, maybe write a little riff, I may not use that ever, but I got better at the guitar. It's the same with writing. But I feel like I feel like people don't realize that. It was a very long time before I realized writing isn't about making something good always. It's like, no, you're practicing right now, trying to make something good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I still think, like, for me, in Absolute Tabletop, when we're writing one of our books, I still do this. I don't show you guys my first drafts. I'm sorry. I still don't do it. I have it in a separate doc because I know it's going to be bad, and I still am so self-conscious about it that I don't even want my best friends and co-founders and creators to see my awful first drafts.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and that's a good example of what we're talking about here is like, you're never even letting it see the light of day, but it's still a necessary step. It still has to happen.
It exactly is. And so the other thing that really springs to mind is for people who, especially, when they tell me, hey, I want to write. I really want to write. I want to do this for a living. I've got a book, but I just don't have time and so on. It's like, listen, you have to figure out a way to make time in your life to do this consistently, because it is a trade. If you're seriously looking to do this as a profession, you have to figure out a way to get better at it so that those rough drafts are still rough. But I have to say that the first drafts that I'm rocking out now are definitely more refined.
Exactly.
Because I've started to figure out why the other ones were bad after I've seen you and James and Barker edit them.
Yeah, you've practiced and you've seen what they become, and it's still, like you said, not even close to a usable state. But without that, the rest of the steps don't happen. If you don't write the first thing, you'll never get the final draft.
Well, and I think it's because you're figuring out what you personally, as a creative person, need out of that first draft. You're like, what am I looking to gain here? And what you're looking to gain most of the time is like, I need a foundation to build upon. Like, I need a skeleton. I need the ideas on the paper so that I can expand upon them and start to finesse this a little bit. And once you start to figure out your step-by-step process, it gets a lot easier. And part of that step-by-step process is that shitty first draft.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's 100%. And so taking that, and so to anybody listening, we are telling you, you have to write down your ideas in a rudimentary, bad form. If it's bad, you're doing it right.
Yeah.
If it's better than bad, great, you're better than average. But I want to talk about something that, to me, was a turning point. And it was that I came to the realization that if I only write when I'm inspired, I will write rarely.
If ever.
Yeah, if ever, exactly.
And so the reason why I wanted to call this Scheduling the Muse is because I think it is a myth that there is such a thing as a muse that is necessary to start one of these awful first drafts.
Yeah.
Now, I want to be clear. There is a feeling, there's this sort of ethereal thing that happens, that sort of inspiration. I do think there is a thing that you could call the muse, but I don't think your muse needs to be around for you to do the hard work.
Well,
yeah,
and actually I want to just super go off on a tangent because I feel like I have experience with this outside of writing, and it's occurring to me that this is hopefully very insightful, because I've heard the muse in creative aspects my whole life. And like you said, you're like, well, some people, they're like, well, no, I can't write unless I'm inspired. But like you said earlier, Matt, I mean, you had to write 12 pages a day, and it didn't matter if you were inspired. You better be writing.
It had to happen, yeah.
But what I have experienced this in is programming. My day job is I'm a computer programmer, and it's not the most creative thing, but there are times when you don't want to do it. So we're going to pretend that inspiration in this case is simple motivation, or the idea that you're like, all right, I'm not procrastinating, I need to get this done. But you don't want to. But there's a feeling I get once I start, literally, 5 minutes after I start, where it's so much easier, and I'm focused, and things are making sense, and everything's clicking, and I've never considered it, but it's like, well, that's sort of like the muse. But really, it's just, I've sort of given myself up to the fact that I'm working. I'm at my job, so I've just decided, okay, I'm doing it, I'm in here. And now my muse has showed up. It's like, well, no, I did that. It wasn't like, well, I'm feeling inspired. It's like, well, no, you better start feeling inspired if you want to get any work done today.
It's kind of like when you're on a bike and those first few pedals are really, really hard. Like,
oh, wow.
Because you're going from a standstill to moving. But once you get those first few pedals in, all of a sudden the bike is sort of moving on its own. And you're pedaling to keep it moving, but it's sort of just coasting along on its own inertia. And being creative is the same way, where it's like, if you can get past the first few sentences, if you can type out a page, you'll feel it start to kick in. You'll feel it start to sort of write itself almost. And getting that going is agonizing, though. And so I see why people get deterred, because they open up a Word doc, or they put pen to paper, and they're like, this is awful. Like, I wrote 5 sentences, and I hate every single word in every sentence. Like, I hate the punctuation. Like,
Exactly.
I hate everything about
start.
it.
Yeah.
But once you get past that point, like, all of a sudden you're like, hey, okay, yeah, that's a cool idea. All right, I'm starting to enjoy this a little bit. And it's just, it's, like, people think that professional writers sit down and just, all right, my book's written, you know, and it's like, you know, why do you think it takes George R.R. Martin 12 years to write a damn book? It's because he's sitting there tossing out ideas, seeing what sticks, getting through the drudgery that is creating.
Exactly.
That is those first few petals. Even if you have 4 books, you're like, well, I got to start this one now. What do I do? I have all these ideas.
Exactly. And you know what? It's funny because writing is one of the only professions where you're allowed to make that excuse. And Matt, that is such a good analogy, because what carpenter do you know that's like, well, all this ugly wood's just sitting here? It's like you have to go through the process of sawing and grinding and sanding and hammering. These are brutal things you're doing to this wood. But it starts off just planks or, you know, whatever shape you want to get it into. You really got to cut and move and remeasure and try things. And it's like, what makes you think that writing is any different?
Well, like you can't throw a bunch of wood into a pile and go, oh man, why isn't it a table?
It's
what did I do wrong?
I hate these 5 planks.
And so actually to bring that even further, like most other professions, carpenters obviously plan what they're doing beforehand. Now, it could be hard to think, man, a table, that's really daunting. I don't even know where to start. And I'm like, well, start by your first draft. Start by planning the table. That's how you know how many planks you need. I feel like, again, for some reason, writing has a lot of the same elements as other things like carpentry or like programming, but because we refer to them differently, people don't line them up. And even myself, I didn't, you know, like you said, the muse. And I'm like, well, for me, in other endeavors, that's just focus because I started working. And I feel like it is, you know, like you said, I'm like, there's no other profession in which you're like, well, I don't know what to do. I'm like, well, start doing your job. Maybe start with that.
No, exactly. You know, so I want to give everyone who's listening very tangible, actionable advice on how to do this, because I also feel like I'll listen to a podcast like this and I'll be so stoked, right? I'll be in my car and I'm like, you just wait. Starting tomorrow. And I'm like, so here's the way I want to paint this. And it was that for me, I had this really awful anxiety when I wasn't being creative. Mm-hmm. But what unlocked the ability to schedule the muse for me was literally a schedule.
Right.
Set time. James's cat, I don't know if you can hear it, James's cat is adventuring in the room right now, and we've been waiting for something to fall down. The cat is jumping from Indiana Jones setting to Indiana Jones setting.
The boulder just came down and she ran out of the room.
But the thing that unlocked this for me, and I want to pick your brains about this because I think it can work for everyone, because it's literally just rote. It's pedaling the bike. It's doing the job that you're saying. For me, I talked to my wife, and it was, okay, from 10 p.m. to midnight every weekday is my time to sit and work on the things that I want to work on. This has unlocked the world for me because it is the time devoted to it. So I know, oh, hey, it's time. I have about 30 minutes before I start. And then when that clock hits 12, you better believe it's rare that I stop right at 12.
Yeah.
But what do you guys do? Are you able to do something like this? How are you able to schedule the muse? I mean, am I out of the...
No. So I think what you're saying is, first of all, just a very important tip. Part of the reason, like we talked about, is, okay, so you sit down to write. Not you, but someone who doesn't schedule the muse. You sit down to write, and you can't think of anything, and you had all these ideas, like you said, in your car 10 minutes ago, and suddenly you're blank. So what do? You surf Reddit, and you go look at something else, and you maybe look at some other ideas you had, and then you remember this other thing that you wrote that's on your hard drive, and you're reading that, and then you start playing a game, and then suddenly you realize that 2 hours has passed, and you haven't written a word.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's because you don't schedule it. If you say, no, all I'm doing right now is I'm scheduling it and I'm writing, and it doesn't matter if I'm writing or I'm staring at the blank page, or I am writing just random words or the first things that come to my mind, if I am doing this for the next however long, 30 minutes, hour, 2 hours, that's all I'm doing. Eventually you're going to get bored and you're going to start writing, whether you like it or not. So I feel like that is one of the most important things you can do if you want to get something done, because otherwise it's easy to come up with an excuse as to why you don't want to, or get distracted if you're not saying, this is my time to do this, and later is my time to play games or watch movies or hang out with my family. Scheduling is one of the most important things, I think.
Matt, what do you think about all this?
So you can't write without it. Like, if you wait for inspiration to strike, you're going to write very seldom, if ever, like you guys are saying.
Right.
And there are days when I do nothing but write, or I'm just like, man, I feel great. I have all these ideas. Everything is coming. My dog is playing with her toy.
This is the pet
There are
podcast.
times when I'm trying to record a podcast and my dog plays with a toy. There are times when it's like everything just clicks, and I'm like, I'm writing this, I'm working on this, I got an idea for a new supplement, I'm writing that down, and everything. I'm liking the way that things are coming out. I feel like this is how it should feel all the time. But it's not. You have to have those days where you make yourself do it.
Yeah.
And there's a really applicable quote here, and it's, I hate writing. I love having written.
Yeah.
And this is...
Oh, I love
that. My English teacher in high school told me that. And I think it's a quote from somebody else, but I always attribute it to him, because when he said that, it, like, did the, like, zoom in on my face as my eyes widened, like, oh my God. Yeah. Like, that's how writing feels to me, because being creative it's arduous, it's agonizing. You're literally sitting there and you've got your negative self-talk in your head, like, oh, you can't do this, you can't write, this is terrible what you're doing right now, everything sounds bad.
Yeah.
But if you sit and you set aside 2 hours, an hour, if you set aside 15 minutes a day and you do nothing but write, you're not going to feel like you wasted your time. You're going to look back, you're going to see, I wrote 2 pages, I wrote 3 pages.
Exactly.
You're going to feel good about that.
And it is certainly, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a snowballing effect, but there's a word, I can't think of it, but it's the effect stack.
Yeah, exactly. Exponentially.
It's cumulative.
Cumulative. Thank you. That's what happens. That's why when you put an editor on the podcast, we sound smarter.
But, so here's exactly what I would liken that to, that I can almost guarantee everyone has an experience with. The same quote. I hate exercising, but I love being fit.
Yes,
I love having exercise.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, it's like, it sucks. And then, like, afterward, you feel great. And in the same respect, you don't exercise and you eat a Five Guys burger with fries and you sit there, it's good at the time, and then 10 minutes later you're like, wow, I really regret that.
James, are you in my house today? How did you know?
See, dude, and that, to me, the creative equivalent of this, oh man, this is the worst. That crummy feeling you get when you overeat and don't exercise.
Yep.
To me, the creative equivalent, I had this idea. Man, it was cool. And I sat on it. I didn't do anything with it. And then a year later, I see someone else do it.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh no.
It's like if someone else, this is the worst ever, if someone else could work out your body and then use it. That doesn't make any sense.
What?
But something I want to bring up. So this is something I thought of while we were talking about this. I feel like I've done this before without realizing it. But it's hard, basically what I'm saying is I'm segueing right now. It's hard to start with a blank page. So, all right, you've set aside your 2 hours and you're staring and you spend 30 minutes. I have no idea what to write. You have all these ideas, like you said. Well, I've found that what you can do is look up writing prompts and just apply them to your idea.
Yeah.
So you're like, all right, I have this idea about, Game of Thrones, but before it was written. I have this idea about, this fantasy world with a lot of intrigue and there's, this and that, and just put in Game of Thrones stuff here. Basically, you have this idea, but you have no idea where to start. It's so broad.
It's too big. You don't know where to start biting the whale one bite at a time.
Exactly. So just look up some writing prompts. Okay, so I'm going to make up a writing prompt. I didn't prepare for this. So, write about the character the youngest character in your setting, that, the youngest protagonist in your setting. And you're like, all right, well, that's just a place to start. And as little as that is, and I promise there are much better writing prompts out there. As little as that is, that might spark something in you. It's like, oh yeah, so-and-so, and they're the youngest, and you'll just be off and running. And like we talked about, it's all about just doing it. So starting,
well, and the reason why that works so well is because there's another problem that when people sit down with a blank document, it's like, I could write literally anything. I could write about anything. It could be about anyone. And that's overwhelming because you're like, what if I pick the wrong thing? What if I don't write about something that is interesting or that people like? And if you have a prompt, like you're talking about, James, like, you're like, okay, that's what I'm writing about. That's what I have to write about, and I'm just going to make it happen.
Yeah, and that's why I love exercise videos, because I don't like exercising. But if I know that it's 30 minutes and I just got to do what that guy does as well as I can, which is not usually that great, it's the same thing where I'm like, if I go to a gym, I'm like, I guess I'll do this and that. And I'm like, it's been 15 minutes. I'm like, yeah, I'm done. But with a prompt, it's a little easier.
Well, and I want to say something, and I've heard this multiple times in different places, but I want to reiterate it because it popped into my mind. I thought about it. It's like, you can kind of sum it up like this. There's no such thing as mechanic's block or carpenter's block or doctor's block. Because they're like, hey, I don't feel like doing the job today, but guess what? Well, there's a sick kid waiting in the waiting room.
Yeah.
And so I just think, to me, it's a myth that there's such a thing as writer's block. Meaning, you can be hung up on something, but there are plenty of mechanisms to use to continue to be productive in other areas while your brain, in the back of your mind, figures out how to get over that hang-up.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Matt, what do you do if you're staring at a blank page, or do you have a process to try to get over quote-unquote writer's block?
Yeah, so this is weird, but I've been doing this for years, and it's something that somebody told me about, and I was like, "There's no way that works."
Have you heard of
cocaine? And I put off trying it, and then one day in high school, I was sitting there. I wasn't working. It was summertime. I was just sitting in my room, and I was like, I want to do some writing today. I don't know what I want to write. And I tried this technique out. What you do is grab a book. Grab any book. It could be something pertaining to what you're wanting to write about, like if you're working on a fantasy novel or an RPG supplement, pull out a fantasy book. Pick a random page, start typing exactly what you see. Start typing it. Start typing, Dritz pulled out his 2 scimitars and was rad. Whatever's on the page, just write that. And then after a couple of paragraphs, take it off autopilot. Start writing on your own. And then once you are warmed up and you start feeling like, okay, all right, I'm happy with what I got, start writing whatever it is that you are writing.
Yeah.
I've been doing this for years, and the first time I tried it, I wrote like a 30-page short story in a day. And it was like amazing. Like I was like, wow, that really worked. That worked a lot better than I was anticipating. And it sounds weird because people don't want to just sit there and copy a book, but it starts to get that sort of the gears turning.
Yeah, you warm up.
It makes those first couple pedals a lot easier.
Exactly.
And do you know why I think that works? Because I've never done it, but I'm thinking about it as you're saying it. I'm like, I think I know why that works. Because sometimes people know what they don't want more than they know what they do want.
Yeah.
And when you see a book and you start typing it out, you cannot help yourself by going, I wouldn't use that word.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you put your own in there, and you're like, she should say this. And before you know it, you're telling the author your opinion.
Exactly. And writing your own story. And
I love it.
I feel like it's also, you're doing it and you're warming up. Basically, when you start writing your own stuff, when you just sit down and cold, you're trying to do 2 things at once. You're trying to write and be creative. So if you split those apart, if you say, no, I'm just going to write, I'm not going to worry about creativity, I'm just going to copy what this person has already done so that I can kind of warm up my writing muscles. And then eventually the creativity will find its way in there.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
I love it.
There was one more thing I wanted to bring up because I thought this was weird, and I want to see what you guys feel about it because I think this is the opposite of something that I would do. But I think it was Ernest Hemingway maybe does this. I read it in like a book about writing. And basically what he said was, in order to try and keep momentum, if he was doing really well in writing, he would stop in the middle. he would stop before he was done. He's like right in the middle of this great part. He gets in the groove, he finds it, and boom, stops.
Yeah.
So that hopefully he comes back the next day and is back in the groove. And I'm like, there's no way that works. Maybe.
It does, man. It does.
So is that something you've done, or?
Yeah, because like there have been times where, okay, so say I'm on my lunch break at work, and I take an hour and I do some writing, and like in the last 20 or like 15 minutes, I really get in the groove, and I'm really happy with what I'm writing, and I look at the clock and it's time to go back to work.
Oh yeah.
I'm sitting at my desk at work and I'm like, I can't wait to write more. Like I can't wait to get home so that I can start writing again.
I didn't consider it.
That'll
that way.
persist over a couple of days. Like I'll be driving in the car, I'll be like, man, I'm like, that was really good what I wrote yesterday. I can't wait to get home and start writing again.
Yeah.
And so that absolutely, like if you keep yourself hungry for it, that absolutely will happen. And it'll happen no matter what if you set aside that time. Like
Exactly.
Tim, you're saying, I set aside 10 to midnight, but at midnight I'm still going.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
if
and
you
I
stopped at midnight, the next day, you'd be so pumped to get back to it.
I'm going to try that. And
Yeah.
I think that is a good way to temper it, too, because at that point, if I go past midnight, I'm cutting into my sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I love that. And, just hearing it that way, I think I will do that because it's that unfinished business in your imagination. It's that thing where as long as you don't let it linger too long, like you're saying, like the next day or the next opportunity, I think you're right. I think you have a little more time to ruminate on it and think about it, and you're getting yourself like jazzed up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize it, but I
never
do
thought
that.
about that.
Yeah, well, because first of all, I didn't consider the way you said, Matt, where it's like, it's basically forced. You couldn't keep going if you wanted to without, not going back to work.
Right.
But that actually is a good point because I didn't realize this, but with programming, the same thing happens to me. I'm like, it's so much easier to start when I remember that I was in the middle of solving a problem yesterday, and I know what the solution is. It's just a matter of putting it on the paper, programming it to say, okay, well, now it'll do this and this, and I can't wait. And I spend the whole day thinking about it. And like you said, you're just so jazzed to get back to it. And I didn't realize that I'd had that feeling before, so I think that will absolutely work.
Dude, that's really good advice.
I'm a
because
changed man.
If you would have asked me before, like if it was just James and I would have been like, no way, man, finish what you're thinking of and
Exactly.
all that. But that's a really solid point.
Well, and it's sort of like that feeling, the feeling of being excited to write. That is, for me, that's the best feeling in the world. Like if I'm out on a walk, like if I'm walking my dog and I'm like, I can't wait to get back home and write. Like I love that feeling. It just puts a smile on my face because it's rare at this point, that I get excited about sitting down to write. More often than not, it's like, oh God, I really got to get that thing done. I really got to write this section of Stone Rift, but I don't want to. I really don't want to. But
and
if I can get myself into that rhythm of constantly just putting a cork on it right when it's getting good, I'll keep wanting to come back to it.
And I guess it makes sense if it is a tip from Ernest Hemingway,
Yeah.
I'm like, all right,
Yeah.
I should have maybe given that a little more weight.
Well, and so the thing to say, too, is, to me, that is keeping more to my own advice. It's scheduling what... So, okay, let me tell you and I guess we'll sort of wrap up the conversation about this on this point, unless you guys have other things you want to mention, but it's the flip side to this coin is that all the other time I have that isn't set aside from 10 to midnight is all for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a liberating feeling to not have that hanging over my head that I'm not writing.
Exactly.
Right.
When you're watching a movie or
Exactly.
out with friends.
And so, and like for me, Saturdays, total day off, 100%. I don't do anything creative. It's just my day with my family and all that. It's liberating, though. The only reason why I can enjoy that Saturday is because I work from 10 to midnight all the other days.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that that's actually really good. It's to adhere to my own advice and say, okay, it's midnight. Got to follow the schedule here because the rest of this time is for me to rest my body.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you're listening to this on Podbean, be sure to follow us. And if you're listening to this on YouTube, be sure to like the video and subscribe so you can see more of these. This is the portion of the podcast now. It's just kind of, we talk about what exactly, literally, is hanging us up creatively on our own personal projects and just kind of talk through them. So, Matt, I was going to throw it to you if you wanted to kind of start first. Is there anything that you want to bounce off of us to kind of brainstorm? Or
Yeah, I guess, the thing that I'm struggling with right now is it's the supplement that I'm writing right now, which is Stone Rift. And Stone Rift is this dwarven city in my homebrew world of Aeronoth. And it's sort of focused on the collection of lightning energy, because the canyon of Stone Rift is sort of located in these lands where lightning storms are just near constant, and so the dwarves have learned how to harness the lightning and use it in different devices and things like that.
Right.
So I'm writing this supplement, and it's going along nicely, but I keep hitting this wall where, I don't know, like, it's been so long since we've just sat and wrote a supplement, because we've been kind of on this hiatus trying to get our physical books out there.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like I feel like I'm out of practice. Like, I'm like, how do I do this again? How do I normally write these parts? How do I normally write these sections? And
oh, yeah.
I'm just I'm whittling away at it. But I don't know, man. I keep hitting these walls. I keep hitting these roadblocks, and it's hard sometimes to just crash through them.
Yeah. I think, so the first thing that springs to mind is, if it's going to be relatively similar, one of the biggest tricks I've learned is, and you might already be doing this, but I will cut and paste or duplicate the Google Doc, totally literally duplicate it, and start writing in the midst of what I've already written to keep the format.
Like for other stuff.
So like the formatting thing, you're saying like, oh, well, how did I handle this section and how do I do this? So
right.
If it was, for instance, like let's say it's the, I don't know, what's the section you're working on?
Like right now, like items, like items, the
Perfect.
weapons and things like that.
So, and this is kind of cool because it's kind of an amalgamation of things we've already talked about a little bit. I would take the item section from one of our older supplements, probably the newest one that wasn't Stone Rift,
right.
and I would duplicate that doc in Google Docs and start off looking at it, because the first thing I'd be is like, okay, what didn't I like when I got the finished PDF in my hand?
Right.
Yeah.
But then I can also tweak the nuanced pieces of the template and go, oh, well, I kind of like this. So I don't know if that would help you. I know you're probably already
that would
deep in.
absolutely help, because that's sort of the same idea with what we were talking about earlier, where it's like grab a book and start writing the book.
Exactly.
It's like if I take an older supplement and I'm looking at the weapons, it's a lot easier for me to look at a weapon, delete the text, and replace it with something than it is for me to just completely start fresh. And it's like there's not a huge difference to it, but there's something that happens with your brain where it's like, okay, this isn't so bad. All I have to do is just, take this document that I already wrote and just change this.
I know exactly how that is, because again, in programming, what we refer to that as, and I think it's the same, you would call it the same thing. This isn't a special word.
We call it cheating.
We call it cheating. No, we call that the boilerplate stuff.
Exactly.
Most websites that you make, people have to log in. I can't count the amount of times I've written a script to allow someone to log in. But if you copy most of the login script from the other thing, you're not like, oh, it sucks, I got to write another login script. Like, you're just like, oh, I just have to input the database details here, and I got to tweak this a little bit because they want different password requirements. But other than that, like you said, this is all I have to do. And suddenly you're like, well, no, I got the boilerplate out of the way. Let's do the good stuff. Let's write the item things.
Yeah, dude.
Exactly.
The other thing I wanted to bring up, just as an interesting insight for myself, is that I find it very interesting that is what you're struggling with. Because every time I read your supplements, I think, man, Matt is so good at coming up with items.
It's true. So, I'm always like, dude, that's perfect.
It's like when you read a Stephen King novel or whatever author that you like. That wasn't the first thing they wrote. And even if it's the best thing they've written here, Stephen King is so good at this. Like, yeah, but that doesn't mean that he's good at it. It just means that he practiced and did it a lot. Like he worked on it. That was all. He's not like...
And the thing I love about using templates is it's psychological, but it feels like I'm more done than I am.
Exactly.
Because I'm not starting with that blank page.
The text is already italic. It already says the item is uncommon. Yeah. The font size is right. And I'm like, those are tiny things, but
totally,
you're there already. You're halfway there.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. Or like stat blocks are great for that. You grab a stat block, copy and paste it, and it's like all I have to do is replace the numbers, change the abilities, and I'm good to go.
Sure. And certainly we have the benefit of working with the four of us in the company. There's also something to be said that, you know, if you do that too much in the wrong way, which you're obviously not, things can feel very cut and pasted, like, oh, it's the dwarven rune of summoning. Like,
Yeah,
like,
right.
That's
so,
different.
That's totally separate.
That's
but
where the template part comes in, not
Correct.
the stealing.
Nah, man, but
Yeah.
I'm excited about Stone Rift. Stone Rift is a world that I've played in as, you know, a player in Matt's campaign, The Provokers. He has a YouTube channel, Fistful of Dice, as we kind of mentioned at the beginning. But this is, to me, this book is the culmination of a lot of Aeronoth lore that is really close to me because my character was from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is probably the Aeronoth supplement I'm most excited for.
I think for me it is too, just because all of the supplements thus far have really been centered around this one area. Like, you know, you have the Wayward Wanderer and Brook, which are sort of in a similar area. And then you have the Convocation, which is much more global, but it's very tied to this event known as the Great Scorching. And everything is like, oh, the Great Scorching, here's how this happened, here's how this happened. And Stone Rift had nothing to do with the Great Scorching. Like, the Great Scorching happened, the dragons were just burning everything, and the doors were like, okay, cool, we're going to close the windows, like, and just waited for it to blow over, you know what I mean? And so it's like, they're literally their own world, and it's really cool to be worrying about something else entirely.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it. And you can check out these supplements on absolutetabletop.com. It's under the Fistful of Dice tab, and you can check out Matt's Aeronoth. It's an entire world that he built from scratch. I mean, Matt, how long has Aeronoth been around?
In various forms or others, it's like 15 years at this point.
I love that. I love that there are physical and PDF books, because so many creators have had fantasy worlds that have lived in their heads for that long or longer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And their ultimate goal might not be to get it printed, but with the barrier of entry being so low nowadays, it's like, man, it's a good goal. It's a cool thing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The other thing that I really love about Stone Rift versus the Convocation or Brook, specifically against Brook, is Stone Rift is so enormous and similar to the way that, like you said, it's a little less focused on the Great Scorching and other things that you focused a lot on. In general, it is a very large and varied place that I can't wait to learn about, especially after seeing it in the Provokers. But it's just like, I feel like there's so many adventures to happen there, especially after seeing the map that we're getting made. That's just like, that is so inspiring to think, I want to run an adventure here and here, and just point to the different places that look awesome to run adventures in.
Yeah, I think Stone Rift more than just about any other book is the most ripe for running adventures in.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude. And so the one final thing I wanted to hit you up about Stone Rift, and then I'm going to hijack you guys into helping me with something I'm struggling with. So far, what's that thing you're super proudest of? The thing where you're like, man, where you kind of step back and you're like, dude, I thought of that, and that's a cool feeling.
Yeah.
Is there anything so far with Stone Rift where you're just super proud of what you came up with?
You know, I really like the burrow goblins, which are an enemy that is going to be featured in the book, and they're these sort of primitive cave-dwelling goblins that can blow themselves up as a natural defense mechanism, and it's an idea that I had that was, I think, a pretty original idea and a different take on goblins, and I just think it's really cool, and getting the art for the goblins, seeing the art really helped solidify that for me. But it's one of those things where that was an idea bred through trial and error. You know, I initially was going to put, I think, rat folk as the kind of chief enemy that the dwarves were dealing with, and I had lots of stuff written about that, and I'm not using any of it. But I had to get through that to get to the point where the burrow goblins happen.
Oh, I love that. And what a testament to the entire first half of this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here's what I hear from that. You got to a different destination, and though you're not going to use any of the rat folk stuff now, hey, guess what? You've got this big chunk of rat folk stuff that you can easily modify and use as a starting point anytime you need rat folk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, awesome. Well, Stone Rift is coming out here shortly. The official release day it's November. Or sorry, November. God, September 30th. Is that right?
No.
I was like, pretty soon
God, I
here.
hope
I'm like,
not.
No, it's not.
What is this? I am the worst. What is the release day?
So it's looking like early to mid-October at this point.
Do you know why I think that?
Why?
Because I'm one of the artists on the book, and the art deadline is the 30th.
Yes, September 30th.
I'm like, why do I have Stone Rift in my phone as the 30th? It's because I need to have the art done by then.
So mid-October, I think you said.
Well, yes. So if you need real
I
details...
was like, you're making me nervous. I'm like, that's coming up sooner than I thought. Holy cow.
If you need real details from a person who knows what they're talking about, go to absolutetabletop.com, or the Absolute Tabletop Facebook page is probably the best place. So I got a thing I want to run by you guys, if that's cool, James.
All right, yeah, no, I gotta go somewhere. So you just
you gotta listen. You
I got
sit here and write your Fallout adventure. So in our campaign setting, James and I have, it's called Dragon Grin, and it's where evil has won, and it's been about 20 years since this event called Lightfall, and there's an ever-present evil known as the Dismembered Lord, who rules with an iron fist and has an ever-growing shadow. The status quo, though, is that things aren't so bad. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's a very terrifying point, is that for most of the time, things aren't as bad as you think they would be.
Yeah.
It's more like Stepford Wives, white picket fences, nobody talks about it, kind of, you know. But here's the issue that I'm dealing with. And Matt, I think you're really good at coming up with these kinds of things. Just a sense of realism in the world, and especially, we were just having a conversation about villains and their motives and things like that.
Right.
We want to have areas outside of Central Dragon Grin that still are touched by the evil and the negativity of the Dismembered Lord. Mm-hmm. But I'm trying to figure out a way to work that in so that they can still have realistic ramifications of an evil force taking over the mainland.
Right.
But, and I'll give you a couple of examples. So there's a place that is essentially kind of like the most modernized country in the region. It has the highest tech level. But I want it to be so that the Dismembered Lord is present there. But how do I make it so that he's still a scary force with foot soldiers sort of walking around the streets, but not having a full-on red banners raised, everyone's terrified? Am I making any sense?
Yeah, no, you absolutely are. And so, I think that...
Tell me what you do there.
So the way that I would do it is I would make it less apparent. I would make it more insidious.
Ooh,
and
I like that
what
word.
I mean by that is, like, you know, the Dismembered Lord in, like, Grin and even places like Innis, like, he has a presence, right? An actual physical presence.
Correct.
Where there's soldiers walking around and things like that. If you have a place that's sort of separate from that area, think about how it would affect the economy and the trade and the culture of the place. Think about, the Dismembered Lord sending Grima Wormtongue type ambassadors to these different places to whisper in the ears of the leaders and things like that, and sort of showing this sort of insidious sort of shift in culture where you might not even be aware of it, but then you talk to like an elder or something like that, and they're like, yeah, things are really changing around here. It didn't used to be like this. I think things are changing for the worse, and there's always strange people consorting with the king and things like that, and it's like it's less apparent than like jackbooted thugs marching down the streets, but it's almost scarier because it's happening so gradually and so stealthily.
Yeah,
and I love that.
That is the way I see it, because it's difficult for me to imagine that these places would go for occupation. It doesn't matter how strong the Dismembered Lord is in Central Dragon Grin. If you send soldiers to walk around my streets, I'm going to swat you down faster than anything. Because sort of I feel like the unity of a place would lend to that. I mean, I have a standing army possibly and I have a militia, and if you start sending people over, I sort of have home field advantage. It's more likely that if you are like, hey, we just took over all that stuff, but now I'm coming to you.
Right.
I'm like, no. Nope. Like, it's not going to happen. We're going to kill your soldiers in the streets, and you go ahead. You know, it depends on the place and a lot of different things, but I feel like it's a smarter play to slowly get in there, you know, to not make it obvious.
Yeah.
But to still do the things you want, and like you said, you know, influence in really subtle but overarching ways. It
would be kind of an political intrigue type thing, and the Dismembered Lord could do things like, hey, I've got a lot of troops. I'd be willing to help you in a war, or I'd be willing to help you take this land that you want, or acquire this resource that you want in exchange for A, B, and C. Exactly. And all of a sudden, this nation, this culture finds themselves sort of allied with the Dismembered Lord, and it's sort of one of those situations where it's like, are we hanging out with the wrong crowd here? Like, what sort of people are we getting ourselves mixed up in? But they're kind of offering us a deal that we'd be kind of foolish to refuse.
Yeah. Right. And I love two things about that. The first thing is, to piggyback on what you guys are saying, open war is not a wise choice.
Yeah.
And so I love that what you're saying. They would send, like, the Grima Wormtug example to me was awesome, because it's like, what's more sinister? Jackbooted thugs in the streets, like you're saying, a present threat, or a threat that is commanding you behind the scenes and you don't even realize it.
Yeah, because you're going to see jackbooted thugs and you're like, oh, just avoid them, that's bad. But you may not realize that the reason the legislation changed on trade tariffs is because Grima Wormtongue is, you know, whispering in the king's ear to make more money.
And exactly. And the second thing I absolutely adore about that is kind of piggybacking off of what you said is, when the troops are lent, there will be a price to pay later when I need you most. And it's going to be...
And that realization is horrifying.
Exactly.
When you realize, like, I can't back out of this.
Right.
And...
oh, I love that.
That is basically as close as you can get to occupation outside of open war. Yeah. Now it's like, well, even if I wanted to refuse you now, despite outside of the idea that I owe you a favor... Now I said, hey, I invited everyone in. Now I don't have that same defense I had before, where it's like, no, I'm going to stop you at the ports. You're not sending, you know, troops here to live in our homes, basically. But when you say, hey, guys, come live in our homes, you're like, well, okay, now it's a little bit of a worse place to be. Another thing that I wanted to bring up so I have been playing a lot of a grand strategy game called Hearts of Iron 4. And this is a strategy game that happens during World War II, but there's also the lead up to World War II. The world doesn't want to go to war, but inside the game there are a lot of things you can do. The example I want to use are two. One is you can see what political leaning someone is. There were a lot of fascists and a lot of nationalists before World War II, whereas the U.S. was democratic, and that created a lot of tension. But it's the sort of thing where in the game you can boost the popularity of the party you want. If you're fascist anybody, if you're fascist Canada, and you're like, hey, I want to change the U.S. from being democratic, that's that very slow burn that eventually you're like, well, those people like me now because they have the same views as me. And that is a little bit stronger, or can be stronger than, well, we took over, so you have to listen now. It's like, no, we've aligned your people with us so that, basically you can stage a coup at that point. We're like, no, now I do own you because the people have turned on you, because now you're the Dragongren equivalent of fascist.
Right, yeah. No, and I love that. And it's one of those things where if you look at fiction or even history, like, it's one thing to have a villain or a dictator, just a bad guy of some kind that is always a bad guy, and you're just like, well, of course that guy's marching troops into the streets. He's a jerk. He's always been a jerk. But if you have someone that you consider a friend and an ally that has sort of just been manipulating you the entire time, that is crushing. And you're like, I have nobody to blame but myself. Like, this is my fault.
And to some degree,
I love that.
You may not be able to do anything, like you said. If you're like, hey, I'm in a tight spot and he's offering to help, I understand that I'm putting myself in a bad position, but it's this bad position or that one. It's the rock and the hard place,
Yeah.
I feel like
it could even be where the Dismembered Lord is considered somewhat of a savior to these people. You know,
Yes.
if he's helping out and sending aid and supplies and getting this nation, this culture out of a tight bind, and then when he turns, you know, now the leader of this culture is like, well, I'd really like to not do this, but my people love the dismembered Lord.
Yes.
What am I supposed to do here? Because
Exactly.
I know what he's about. I know what he's doing here, but I can't march to war against him because my people would turn against me and probably side with him.
Yeah.
I think that I have just had an epiphany, and it could be something that has been evident to everyone else. You ever read one of those where everyone's like, oh, I just assumed it was that way?
I think this is what I was waiting for you to come to.
It was like a creative blind spot because you're the person that created it. You just didn't think about that part.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that based on this conversation, that the default position in most of the population of our world is that the dismembered Lord's a good guy.
Yeah.
Meaning, well, not most of the population, but it would be like a Democratic sort of Republican split where I think at least half the people are like, no, it's good for us.
Yeah, like,
Right.
hey, no.
And which would explain why there aren't many heroes, because they're like, what are you doing? Like, you're fighting the person that's giving us our food.
Yeah, at least half of the people are, even if it's obvious to some people, I mean, you actually use the best example, the political party system in the U.S. These people that literally believe the opposite of each other and believe, in some cases, the opposite is true. I'm like, well, there can be facts, but that doesn't change the fact that people argue over these facts.
Right.
You know?
And I just love that idea that, and I want to get your thoughts on this, Matt, because I also, the way I would think of it is the books and the campaign setting stuff is written from the perspective of the remnant, the people who don't think and they haven't been eating the lies and so on.
They're the ones that call him the dismembered Lord.
Right. And so, I mean, how does that strike you? Does that seem cool to you, or does that seem like it betrays the setting?
No, I think that, you know, that I love that sort of insidious sort of where even the heroes, because I think that a big thing in Dragongrin is like heroes are not wanted.
Correct.
Right? Because they're troublemakers, they stir up trouble. And I think that sort of fits with it because heroes wouldn't be tolerated because A, they stir up trouble and they bring destruction wherever they go because the dismembered Lord retaliates, but also because the people are like, hey, listen, like, we're protected here. The dismembered Lord, like, you know, takes care of us.
Right.
And we don't want another Lightfall happening because that's the worst thing that's ever happened to Dragongrin was Lightfall.
Yeah.
I love that.
And another thing is, it's the sort of thing where the dismembered Lord realizes this and isn't outwardly evil if he can help it. You know, if he is, say, sending supplies to someone who's his ally, he doesn't make it obvious that he's stealing said supplies from someone else that owes him a favor. You know, he's taking their grain that he's leaving them barely enough to live on because he needs to, you know, make good on this deal to get this other ally. But he doesn't tell them that. He's not like, hey, listen, I'm starving these other people so that I can give you this. You know, like you said, manipulative but not like outwardly evil, like kill them all because I hate them. It's like, no, I'm using everything to my advantage.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think that opens up, I mean, I feel like that is a very simple concept that really unlocked the world in a lot of ways for me, is that the players are obviously of this remnant, but we were also toying with the idea of making sure that there's at least one section in the book, probably not woven throughout, but at least one section of what if you want to play a character who's aligned with the dismembered Lord.
Yeah.
Right.
Not necessarily an anti-paladin, like you're not a blackguard with a skull on your face.
You're not chaotic evil.
Yeah.
But what happens if you want to take the political side of how that works?
You're not chaotic evil. You're just a Republican.
I'm a chaotic Democrat.
Yeah.
But just having that I don't want to say rule set in there, but just some ideas so that players can decide sort of which side they're on. I think it would be really interesting to have an adventuring party that is made to, even if they're not trying to kill people, they go on the hunt and try to report other adventuring parties that aren't sanctioned.
Well,
yeah.
And I'm realizing this immediately, that could be more like the style of Star Wars Edge of the Empire, where they're not necessarily doing it because they feel that it's right. Some maybe, but I feel like it would be more like, hey, I'm getting paid for this, or this is my job, or, you know, they may agree with it.
I'm picking the winning team.
Exactly, where they're obligated for some reason. Like, I feel like it can create interesting situations where you could be good or evil and still align yourself with the dismembered lord, because it's not all crucifixions and, mass murder. It's like, well, no, I mean, we did come here and we have to imprison this guy, but, he did something wrong. Whether it was wrong in the eyes of us or them, or you believe it or not, that's the law, and we're taking him in.
Yeah, well, and it's like, this is an easy sort of comparison to make here, but it's like, looking back at the Third Reich, it's like, do you think every single man, woman, and child in Germany was a genocidal maniac? No, they followed Hitler because they thought they were doing the right thing, and they were being led by an extremely charismatic, well-spoken person. And I think it's the same thing in Grin, where obviously there are people that kind of see the forest for the trees and say, hang on, wait a minute.
Yeah.
This is not right here. But for the most part, the population is going, yeah, this is great. This is great for the country. I love Hitler. He's awesome. Now take that soundbite, Tim, and just post Matt Click saying, I love Hitler. He's awesome.
I'll do it.
He's awesome.
I'll do it with I'll find one of those old newsreels that's got the Nazi propaganda music.
Yep.
And so the other thing that I think, and this is how I've always felt about the other people in Grin, is that they are more likely to see that something is wrong. The people that are in it, they're a little bit Stockholm Syndrome.
Yeah.
Whereas the other people that are, making these deals, these other sort of countries, we'll say, these other regions, are like, listen, we've heard stories. So this isn't our favorite idea, but okay, this thing, some appeasement and some, getting in bed with the dismembered lord. But it also allows for different people reacting differently. Some people would absolutely not align themselves with the dismembered lord at all. Now, he might have agents, infiltrating and spies and things, obviously has a presence there, but some people are going to be more the type to say, oh, okay, if you pull me out of the fire here, if you send me these troops or this grain, I'll help you later, even if I don't like it. It creates a lot of different political circumstances in different places, and I like that it won't be one note, the dismembered lord rules everything,
Yeah, exactly. Well, and if you think about a farmer in Grin, dude doesn't care that the dismembered lord is necessarily an evil tyrant. He's like, I just don't want there to be any more war. Lightfall sucked for me. My fields burned. There were soldiers trying to stay at my house. It sucked. But now that the dismembered lord won, really, it's not too bad. I just farm my land and they leave me alone and things are good. So it's why would that farmer have any inclination to not want the dismembered lord in charge?
Exactly. And that would be most people, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like you're saying, heroes aren't welcome for that reason, because a hero means making waves. Yep. When someone comes around brandishing a sword going, I noticed that, there were some of the dismembered lord's troops here last week. Do you need me to do anything for you about that? And it's like, nobody.
Nope. No, thank you.
Keep moving. You go
Keep
to the next
walking.
house. Yeah.
Because they aren't still here, and that's a good thing.
I'm all set on the war. Thanks.
Yeah, because they're like, you know what I'm concerned with? I'm concerned that my family has food on the table and that we have blankets so we don't freeze in the winter. Those are my concerns right now. And as long as those needs are being met, I'm fine.
I love that, man. Well, this has been super helpful. So I think we're getting pretty close to time. Matt, was there anything else you wanted to throw in about Stone Rift, or anything else you wanted us to kind of help you work through? Or
no, man, this has been great, and I'm feeling pretty inspired myself, and I appreciate you guys having me on. This is great.
For sure. No,
yeah,
it was
absolutely.
Awesome. This has been Destroy Artifact Episode 3, Scheduling the Muse. No matter what platform you're listening to this podcast on, just comment if you have questions or if you want us to kind of go back and forth with you. I mean, this is just us telling you what we're dealing with. And one of the through lines that I'm finding as I work more creatively is every creative person is just a human being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have emotions, they have struggles, they have a process that they've developed over practice. And this is just sort of our study to unearth those processes and make them less mystifying.
Yeah, because I feel like writing has a lot of words that mean things that can be likened to normal stuff, but people don't realize it. I certainly didn't realize it, for a while, where it's like, oh, I need inspiration. I'm like, no, you need to just start working, and that part will come,
Yep, exactly.
So, Awesome. Well, check out Matt's YouTube channel. It's a Fistful of Dice. We will be actually playing, and I'll get this date right. We'll be playing in the first session of the Provokers Season 2 Bleak Wrath, Sunday, the 25th of September. And that's going to be at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, yeah?
Yeah.
And so tune in. If you don't know what the Provokers are, I think you're in for a treat. Check out Matt's channel, and you can check out the Provokers playlist. James, is there anything else you want to throw in there?
No, that's about it.
Awesome, guys. Well, thanks for listening, and be stirred, be creative, figure out what your process is, but don't wait for the muse. Be your own muse. So this has been Destroy Artifact, and until next time, may your dice roll high.